Welcome to the great debate. No, not yet. A little bit later, but I'm here to talk about probably one of the most exciting releases. Actually, for me, it is the most exciting release that we've done thus far with our SONAR platform. I'm here with Ryan Grody, supply chain market expert. He's going to help us walk through here in a minute. But first, I want to set the table about what this is and what it's supposed to do and accomplish. For so long, the trucking market environment, we've used the rate as the benchmark, as the tool that everybody looks at and says, hey, what's the rate in the lane? And the rate doesn't really tell you anything about service or compliance or anything that goes into making that rate. This tool that we've developed together with our tender data and our rate data helps us evaluate the true value that you get when you see that rate. So what's in the rate? Any given rate will give you a certain amount of service. The service level varies. Typically, you find the higher the rate, the better the service, the better the compliance. And in that, you can set your budgets. You can talk about, have I risk managed? Anybody that's procuring transportation, they're like, oh, what about the rate? How much does it cost? Well, what about the service that comes along with that rate in the fourth quarter? The rate that you purchase in bid season, fourth quarter of 2023 may not be as applicable or as valuable in fourth quarter of 2024 as many of us in the industry are expecting that to happen. So the compliance curve, as we call it internally, and what we will probably be calling it henceforth, is a tool that allows you to understand the inherent value of any given rate in any given lane. So before we go through the product itself, I have a noisy chart for you to look at. Now this chart is a combination of rates and our tender data compliance. Tender rejection index with two rates. One of them is the contract rate, which is in the yellow line. That's our contract long-term. I know contract is kind of a loosely used term, and that's part of the point here, is that contract rates have been called paper rates because they become less valuable over time. And yet, there are long-term contract rates. A lot of people outside the industry don't understand that contract rates don't necessarily mean a truck has to show up. Hence the tender rejection index that you see there in that big, luminous Devil's Tower, White Mountain. Tender rejection rates, of course, spiked during COVID, and it makes it a little bit easier to visualize this. But the point of the compliance curve is to help you evaluate at what rate point am I going to get the best compliance for my dollar. So normally when you go and you buy a TV, maybe the low-end TV that lasts you a couple of years is an okay thing. Maybe you're okay with that. And you want to target some cost savings and just say, I just need to get in the door. I need a TV to watch. Maybe I want a TV that gives me 4K, ultra high definition. I'm going to pay for that, though. And the fact that we don't think about purchasing capacity in the same manner is interesting. And that's what we're here to explore a little bit of. But you see, as the rejection rate spikes in white, that rate for both the spot market in pink and in yellow increases. The spot rate, of course, increases rapidly. The contract rate tends to increase much more slowly, obviously. So underneath all that, though, you still have service that's falling apart before you can get to the spot market, before you can get to that long-term rate negotiation process. So that being said, in the current environment, if you look towards the end of this chart, where all the lines are kind of flattening out a little bit, we're starting to enter this period. We've been in a very, very stable procurement space for about 2 years now, longer than 2 years. The longer this goes on, though, we do know this is not a sustainable world because capacity is leaving the market. So what does that mean if you're procuring capacity today? What do I do when I don't trust that this environment is going to last for the next 12 months? And that's where this comes into play. We can see the pink line already starting to creep higher, moving higher, closer to that contract line. Tender rejection rates, even though they haven't increased a ton, haven't started really spiking, but they are increasing, telling us that the turn of the tide is about to happen. So let's go ahead and start showing them a little bit about what we've got here today with the compliance curve. So Ryan, you're our supply chain, procurement, transportation specialist here. So let's walk the people through a little bit what this tool is and how to use it specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the landing page as our SCI, our supply chain intelligence tool, exists today. So users of this tool are familiar with this page. The current version that's out in production today allows a user to upload a lane set of truckload lanes with a benchmark rate, line haul rate, and compare that against our benchmark rate data. The new version that we'll jump into now overlays this compliance curve that Zach's been talking about that really starts to paint the picture between not only rate, but service. And so you can see here on the summary page, we still show the network summary. And so this shipper, fictitious shipper, has uploaded freight that represents $50 million in spend and an average line haul of about 335. We see that based on those benchmark rates that shipper uploaded, our estimate of their market compliance is about 93%. Now, if you kind of work your way over to the optimization, this is where we get into that compliance curve that Zach's talked about. What I want to talk about real quick first is the actual curve you can see there. So the curve, very much representative of a logistics curve. On the x-axis, you have price, and on the y-axis, you have compliance. So the higher up you go on the y-axis, the more compliance you get with your rate. And so what you'll see is on that curve, the higher we go up or to the right on the curve, that means the more you're paying per mile, but the higher your compliance is. If we go left and to the bottom, lower the compliance, but also lower the cost. And so this system, when you go into the summary page here, it'll kick out initially at the balanced optimization. And that's what you see with that downward line, right? That is the point on the curve that you'll see it's the point of diminishing return. So the more you pay in costs, you're only going to get marginal increase in compliance. Said technically, that is kind of the apex of the slope. And so that is where you continue to pay more, you can get smaller increases in service. But what you'll see here is our output of optimization shows that the balanced summary for this curve shows that shipper's spend of about $50 million, if they wanted to balance that consideration between cost and service, would kick them out a network spend of about $44 million, which equates to about a 90% compliance and a rate of about 320. So you can see, it's a little small for me on there, but you can see you're only losing about 3% in estimated compliance, but you're saving 4.5% in cost. So it's a $5 million reduction, considering, again, both cost and service. So if we want to click into the optimization now, you'll see that the user is given three choices. Do they want to do that balanced cost between compliance and rate per mile? Do they want to go minimum cost? They're not concerned with compliance. All they want to do is save on their network spend. Or do they want to go max compliance? Do they want to spend top dollar to get the absolute best compliance that they can within the network? So if we click the minimum cost and click optimize, then you'll see that jumps down, right? So that line now is at the very bottom of that curve. It's showing a rate of $1.50, but a compliance just over 50%. Again, this is minimum cost. This tells the shipper, hey, maybe you don't care about the pickup here. This isn't critical freight. Maybe this is just a transload shipment between warehouses that have 100 days of inventory on stock. If you want to apply that to the entire network, you could save $25 million, pay $1.50, but you're going to see your estimated market compliance drop about 40%, right? From 92% to about 52%.
Yeah, and this is the highest level view. This is the summary page view of all your costs. And we'll go into the granularity here in a minute. But I think the value add here is, hey, as a transportation procurement manager, specialist, transportation manager, 3PL, anybody that's doing managed transportation in any given level, you want some level of accountability of your directive. Hey, go get me the lowest end cost possible. Now you have an output that tells you exactly what your service expectation or service level will be if I target the low-end cost. This has been a huge talking point this year, as a lot of transportation and procurement managers have come up to us and said, well, hey, you're telling us that the market's going to turn. What do we do about it? Well, this is the solution. Hey, you're not going to tell your managers, your bosses, your C-suites, no, I'm not going to save you money, but there is a tangible output. There is a trade-off there when you target that low end, and this is a way to quantify that.
Yeah, absolutely. So say we don't want to go minimum cost, right? We don't want to have to deal with a 50% compliance rate and some additional operational touches. So let's go max compliance instead. And we'll click that optimization, and you'll see again, we move up the curve now. We're at the furthest point on that curve. We're paying top dollar, and now we're getting top compliance, right? So we see me as a shipper, my spend just went up $10 million. Instead of a $3.35 rate, I'm paying $4 a mile. But again, I'm squeezing out that final bit of compliance. I'm moving up from 93% to 98%. So that looks good for me. My budget's fat. Let's go into the details. And then this is where, you know, as Zach said, that initial page is the summary overlay. If you want to apply a single optimization to all the lanes within your network, you can do that. But now drilling down into the lane level optimization, we have the ability at a lane level to select different optimization types. So the way we think about this is, say you have a vast network of freight. A lot of that is what we could call standard freight. It's just a standard shipment. But again, as I touched on, maybe you have some freight that it doesn't need to move tomorrow. It can move when you find the cheapest carrier. Maybe you just want to cover their fuel. We could select that at a lane level here and select minimum cost. And you'll see that that adjusts for those 5 lanes. So the remainder of my network now shows max compliance with those top 5 showing minimum cost. And you can see up in the banner at the top there that we've now actually adjusted that spend again. So from that 60 million, we've dropped down 3 million after adjusting these 5 lanes to minimum cost. So we're now at that 57 million, showing about a 95% compliance. So again, going from that 98 for full network coverage at max compliance, and now at about 95%. You know, so I feel comfortable with this. I'm ready to move forward. Jump into the list view. And this is where we get as granular as possible. This is going to show the curve that's built out for each of your lanes. So you can see, again, that trade-off between cost and service. You can see it at the lane level from origin to destination. Hover over those points so you can really get an understanding from our market data here at FreightWaves what we're seeing in terms of that logistics curve. I will note that in this view here, you know, if we don't have enough market data to supply the exact OD pair, we're going to build a curve based on the regional KMA. So we'll look at that regional view from origin to destination, produce the same curve, and then show you where your rate falls on that curve. So you get a sense of where do I want to be with regard to cost and compliance.
Great point. So Ryan, let me ask you this. In all of this, you know, you're looking at this at a high level. What is the biggest value add that you think, you know, outside of, you know, this SCI platform? What is the most exciting thing about this from your perspective, from a procurement standpoint?
Oh, I mean, for me, it is very much knowing the level of service that you should be obtaining with the cost that you're paying. Mm-hmm. You know, so often we see the rejection rate spike and shippers just want to throw top dollar, premium dollar at it, but they don't actually know what level of compliance that should be buying them. And we've now put that in a visual picture to say, okay, you don't need to be paying the incremental 50 cents. You're not getting, you know, the additional compliance. Or on the flip side of that, you're paying top dollar, you're okay going down on compliance, so let's move down that curve a little bit and save some money.
Yeah, so evaluating the value of your dollar that's being spent is no longer hidden behind some rate. It's like, well, I'm paying $2 a mile, but so-and-so's paying $3.50 a mile. But wait, they've got a bunch of add-ons that's making that rate higher. And, you know, comparing rates against each other is something to do. It's benchmarking, it's important, it's valuable. But understanding the nuance of what that rate means. There's so many things that go into a rate. A rate is so noisy. And the trucking industry in general has been bound to this concept because it's the only tool we've had for a very long time. We've been looking at rates. I've been looking at rates for a very long time, longer than I probably want to. The rate per mile, though, is biased. It's measuring more things than service, than any the underlying costs of a carrier, the market conditions itself. So this tool allows us to really get a peek into how to evaluate the cost of our transportation spend in a relatable manner. The logistic curve, you don't have to be some sort of statistician or data scientist. And thanks to all the data scientists,
Yes.
Elias. Alex Lamb, by the way, our head of product on this one, really spent a lot of time and energy putting this together in a pretty quick amount of time. So they definitely deserve a lot of credit there. All the back-end development team does. But this is a complicated math thing that is actually relatively simple to view and look at. And we are expecting to release it. This is not released as of yet in full form, but it will be released soon. We were just so excited to talk about it. We're targeting the third quarter for this release, but please feel free to come by the SONAR booth where all of our SONAR team will be happy to discuss this and anything else SONAR with you that's coming up, especially this week. Thank you.